October 14th, 2024, 01:12 a.m. Casino de Monte-Carlo, Monaco. A glass struck the mosaic floor with a thin, metallic tinkle. A pile of white chips slid across the baccarat table, scattering like small moons. A woman in a cashmere coat laughed too loudly. For the cameras and the chandeliers, it was another night of high stakes and soft lights. For a small group of handlers watching from a car in a lane of hedges, it was the moment a plan would either succeed or dissolve into rumor. A man with a silver lighter in his palm sat on the far side of the table. To some, he was Amir Reza, an investment consultant with impeccable manners and a taste for single malt. To others, he was Covert Iranian, a fixer whose paper trail began in Tehran and led through couriers, shell companies, and a set of encrypted channels monitored by analysts for years. He wore an expensive watch and a smile that could be read as charm or calculation. A croupier glanced down, then away, pretending not to notice the small ledger folded under his elbow. 40 seconds later, a black Mercedes with diplomatic plates eased into a shadowed passage. Its lights remained low. From the balcony above, a maintenance camera tilted and caught the driver adjusting his gloves. At the far end of the casino, a bartender checked his phone, then pocketed it, as if it were a habit. Those small, ordinary motions became the stitches of a quiet surveillance net. What happened that night would not be acknowledged by any government in public. It would be dissected by analysts, denied in press releases, and debated over closed doors. Before we go further, tell us where you are watching from in the comments, and if these stories intrigue you, subscribe to follow more investigations. The question at the core of this episode is blunt. How did a covert operation with the potential to reshape supply channels and influence networks end up inside Monaco? And who decided it had to be stopped before it left the casino? They had a name for him in internal cables. For the agency, he was a node, efficient, disposable, and well-networked. For local gamblers who had brushed shoulders with him at roulette, he was a pleasant companion who spoke of markets as if they were orchestras. Backstory matters in operations because the smallest detail often opens the largest door. Amir had been born in Shiraz, the son of a mathematics teacher who insisted on exactness and on questioning assumptions. He left Iran in the late 2000s with a scholarship that turned into consulting contracts in Dubai, then Geneva. He built a reputation as a fixer, able to clear regulatory choke points and sew together contracts between reluctant parties. Over time, analysts mapped his purchases: a boutique unit in Monaco, a shell corporation registered in Cyprus, a yacht moored in Villefranche-sur-Mer. He cultivated useful friendships, among them Luc Moreau, a logistics consultant from Marseille who made introductions at ports, Sofia Rinaldi, an Italian banking liaison whose formals softened due diligence questions, Karim Haddad, a courier who traced routes along the Mediterranean, Elias Mansour, a tech broker who dealt with encryption devices, and Captain Laurent Dupont, a security consultant whose licenses and contacts often opened locked gates. Each name was a thread. Alone, any thread meant little. Together, they suggested pattern and purpose. In private intercepts, his communications referenced terms like corridor and seed, language analysts associated with transfers of material and influence rather than simple money laundering. The pattern was not a smoking gun. It was an invitation to look closer. The geopolitical context made the casino more than a playground. Monaco sits on the edge of the European Union, wrapped in prestige, diplomatic traffic, and a concentration of wealth that blurs legal visibility. The principality is a node for financial flows that traverse jurisdictions with differing transparency standards. An operation that used diplomatic channels or shell entities to move sanctioned goods or to plant influence operations could exploit those seams. The regional actors were layered. Tehran sought discreet reach into Western European elite circles to enable procurement of dual-use goods and to cultivate influence among brokers of capital. European investigative bodies were constrained by legal jurisdictions and evidentiary thresholds. Intelligence services from allied countries monitored supply chains and tried to anticipate risk vectors. The tension was between speed and certainty. Act early with partial information and risk diplomatic fallout, or wait for ironclad proof and allow critical material or networks to entrench. For the team on the ground, the calculus came down to a single question. Would an action in the casino stop a trajectory that, if left unchecked, would have had consequences beyond immediate headlines? Planning began in a quiet safe house 3 blocks from the port. The team assembled under the direction of Director Barak, an operations veteran who had spent 2 decades balancing deniability and effect. He was concise in briefings and precise in temper. Gideon led field elements. Yael handled signals and comms. Tomas was the legal and liaison officer, knowing which doors could open with a plausible cover, and Reuven coordinated logistics and extraction. They reviewed maps of the casino, employee rosters, CCTV loops, and shift schedules. They rehearsed routes through service corridors used by linen trucks and nearly invisible stairwells that connected to the maintenance shaft. Tradecraft shaped choices. Which cameras were on local feeds only? Which were cloud-backed? Who emptied the cash boxes nightly? Which diplomatic vehicles had unfettered port access? The plan favored capture over elimination. A captured node offered more than a silenced one. It yielded documents, contacts, and technical material. Capture kept options open: legal prosecution, intelligence debrief, or a controlled handover. The briefing ended with a stark reminder. Tone of voice and subtlety mattered. Monaco would not react well to a bungled operation. The team would have to be invisible even as it acted decisively. Technical preparations were meticulous and intentionally non-operative in public description. The team rehearsed secure approach routes, methods of nonviolent entry that leveraged service access, and contingencies for early extraction. Comms were layered with short windows of low-bandwidth bursts and time-delayed dead drops for intelligence exfiltration. In professional terms that avoid operational how-to content, they established chain-of-custody protocols, verified forensic imaging tools, and arranged for sealed transfers to secure labs. For legal safety, documentation of custody and sealed evidence bags accompanied any item moved off-site. Transport used diplomatic cover only where plausible and where diplomatic channels could not be traced to covert actions. The tradecraft focused on redundancy, accountability, and minimization of collateral exposure. The procedural note was simple: secure, document, and limit signatures to those with need to know. They moved at 23:30, when the high rollers had thinned and the roulette wheels hummed like distant planets. Gideon watched from an alley across the Rue, his breath fogging in the thin October air. Yael, in a staff uniform, borrowed from a supplier the team had turned into a legitimate cover, slipped through a service door with the practiced casualness of someone who belonged. Inside, the casino smelled of cigar smoke and perfume, of lemon polish and espresso. The lighting under the chandeliers softened the edges of faces. The operation had multiple moments that would test resolve. At one table, a minor dispute erupted between 2 players. At the same time, the maintenance camera above table 7 flickered, a point of failure the team had anticipated and planned for. The first critical moment of tension came when a security patrol deviated from its schedule. The second was an unexpected courier who entered the VIP room earlier than intelligence predicted. The third was a power blip that briefly blacked out an auxiliary camera. Each of these required split-second adaptation. Inside the VIP room, dialogue moved like exchanges in a chess match, 8 to 10 short interactions between operatives pretending to be guests and the target. Scenes like this were rehearsed to feel unscripted. Gideon sat at a nearby table for plausibility. Tomas checked the ledger under his napkin. The exchanges were spare but consequential. Gideon. How long will he stay? Yael. Tonight until dawn. He is waiting on a transfer. Tomas. Are the seals in place? Reuven. Seals are ready. Document duplicates are in the briefcase. Yael. Camera 3 will loop in 2 minutes. Gideon. If it goes south, extraction at the service ramp in 90 seconds. Tomas. What about the diplomat? Yael. Diplomat remains on standby. Plates are clean. Gideon. Remember, take him alive. Evidence over silence. Reuven. Understood. No heroics. Those lines, read aloud, were whispers in a room that smelled of citrus and expensive leather. The sensory density increased. The clink of ice in glasses, the rustle of silk sleeves, the hollow thud of a dealer shuffling cards, the coarse thread of a carpet underfoot, the taste of metallic saliva when nerves tightened. 2 croupiers leaned closer to observe a poll. A bartender wiped a rim with a linen so vigorously it left a slight crease. A maintenance worker pushed a cart with clean plates past the staff door. The team used these ordinary motions as moving cover. In the adjacent corridor, Reuven adjusted the magnet on the service lock, a small device that drew the latch long enough for Yael to slip beyond sight. The operation hinged on timing and misdirection. A crucial contrivance in the plan was banal and brilliant: a linen cart. It was common in service corridors and ignored by most cameras due to a blind spot caused by the ceiling structure. The linen cart carried a false bottom with a compact compartment where a person could be obscured for minutes at a time. The linen cart subterfuge had psychological effect. It turned an everyday object into an instrument of tactical advantage. And that transformation is one of the moments that tends to go viral in narratives because it reveals ingenuity in plain sight. That evening, a linen cart rolled by with a staff member pushing. On the team's signal, the compartment opened and the operative inside emerged, blending with a linen-clad maintenance worker and wearing a staff badge purchased for the operation. The cart acted as both shield and prop, creating a staged proximity to the target. Yet nothing goes exactly as planned. The operation's public near exposure occurred when Captain DuPont, who had been contracted as a local consultant for plausible deniability, nearly collided with a police patrol that had entered the back passage after a call about an unrelated parking dispute. The patrol's engine idled under the archway, and 2 officers stepped out, radios buzzing like insects. For a heartbeat, the entire operation hovered on the edge of discovery. This was the 3rd major tension moment, a near miss that demanded rapid improvisation and cool voice discipline. Gideon, with his palms sweating despite the cool night, assumed a disaffected tourist posture, knocked a glass to the floor, and launched into an exaggerated apology in French. His mannerism bought time. Yael responded by stepping forward with an explanation about delivery schedules and an apologetic manager voice, her French clipped and formal. The officers accepted the obvious story and moved on. The operation did not break, but the team adjusted their exit route and timeline. Inside the VIP room, the team confronted Amir. He looked older in close light than in the photos analysts circulated. His hands were steady, his smile readable. The exchange there was a compact interrogation that doubled as a capture. The dialogue had to perform many functions: keep the target calm, extract admission, secure material, and preserve the chain of custody. 10 exchanges flowed with the soft intensity of a coercive chess match. Gideon: Mr. Reza, the night is late. Amir: You seem concerned. I have done nothing wrong. Yael: You were on calls with nodes we have tracked for months. Amir: Calls about logistics, that is commerce. Thomas: There is a ledger. Paper shows routing to sanctioned intermediaries. Amir: People do business differently. You people do not understand nuance. Reuven: We are not here for a lecture. We are here to take custody of certain items. Amir: You will have to show me a warrant. Gideon: We will have legal review. You cooperate, you may explain yourself later. And if I do not, then you will meet another set of consequences. Cooperation keeps options open. You think I would carry incriminating things in a casino? Tomas: People make mistakes. The ledger is where mistakes sleep. Amir's gaze flicked to the briefcase within reach. The croupier watched too closely. Gideon signaled, and two operatives moved in as if to check chips, their hands deliberate and light. They extracted a small leather folio from Amir's bag, business cards, a thumb drive wrapped in tape, a ledger of wire transfers. Each item was photographed by Yael with a small forensic camera that imprinted timestamps and hashed metadata. That technical step was crucial for later intelligence value and for legal resilience. The team documented custody, sealed evidence in tamper-evident bags, and logged signatures to create a defensible chain of custody. Those minor bureaucratic rituals would become major shields against claims of fabrication. The yield of the night was immediate and layered. The thumb drive contained an encrypted database of contacts and a series of purchase orders tied to named suppliers. The ledger listed transfer corridors through Italian ports and diplomatic cover accounts. Intercepted messages linked the account to routing that suggested procurement of dual-use components that could be adapted to missile guidance systems. Analysts later described the intelligence as both confirming known suspicions and revealing new nodes. The immediate tactical impact was to cut off pending procurements and to place several intermediaries under discreet scrutiny. In the first 48 hours, accounts were frozen, couriers were detained for questioning in allied jurisdictions, and port clearances were delayed by administrative review. The operation achieved what it intended. It prevented near-term movement of material while producing evidence that made denial costly. But operations have consequences beyond the bags of evidence. In the days following, diplomatic ripples appeared. Tehran issued a curt statement condemning an unspecified intelligence service for meddling in the affairs of Iranians abroad. A minor cabinet official in Tehran spoke to state media in a way that framed the extracted individual as a legitimate businessman targeted by foreign hostility. Monaco issued a brief note promising full cooperation with legal authorities and asserting its commitment to rule of law, while discreetly reviewing security protocols at official venues. France, whose police had almost intersected with the operation, conducted a closed inquiry into the patrol that had come through the service passage. International press ran multiple narratives, experts citing plausible supply chain interdiction, human rights groups questioning extrajudicial actions, and social media threads that interpreted images of the luxurious casino as proof of widespread corruption. Public reaction was a river of competing frames. Named, actors surfaced in the reporting. Ambassador Jean Morel of Monaco, who issued statements emphasizing legal process. Minister Sahar Karim of Tehran, who decried foreign interference. Director Barak, whose office released a terse non-denial, saying only that national security agencies acted to protect connections and allies. Investigative reporter Lucien Marchand, who published a piece linking the case to opaque financial flows. NGO spokesperson Helena Koskinen, who called for transparent judicial review. And analyst Priya Nair, who offered commentary on procurement networks in a major newspaper. The mix of voices created pressure points that would shape the legal and diplomatic fallout. Beyond headlines, there were procedural ripples inside the agency network. Protocols around using diplomatic cover were revisited in internal memos. Legal counsel reviewed the boundaries of arrest, extradition, and evidence admissibility across jurisdictions. The operation underscored a durable dilemma. Tactical success produced immediate intelligence value, but it also required political capital to defend in public and to justify to allies who might be drawn into line-wide diplomatic disputes. The story of capture versus quiet interdiction resurfaced in internal debates. Some handlers argued that a quieter interdiction with administrative pressure at ports would have avoided publicity. Others insisted that the evidence on the drive warranted immediate action to prevent procurement and to exploit the intelligence window before nodes reorganized. The choice reflected differing risk tolerances and strategic aims. 3 moments of maximal tension deserve close description because they crystallized the human texture of risk and decision. The first moment was the near collision with local police at the service ramp. The second moment was the split second when the maintenance camera flickered, cutting an expected feed and forcing the team to rely on backup logs and human recall for timing. The third moment was Amir's attempt to reach for a small switchblade hidden under his sleeve as 2 operatives closed in. Each moment was short and dense with sensory detail. The police moment smelled of diesel and rain. The camera failure left the air feeling electrically thin. The blade moment carried the metallic tang of adrenaline and the sharp slap of a cuff against a wrist. Each required controlled responses that prioritized evidence preservation and minimized visible force. Together, they made the operation fraught but not catastrophic. In the technical realm, a concise description of a key procedure is worth noting. Forensic imaging of digital media was performed immediately using read-only adapters and cryptographic hashing to ensure integrity. Devices were placed under Faraday shielding to prevent remote wipes. Items logged with timestamps and witnessed by 2 operatives signed supporting documentation. Transport used sealed containers with chain of custody forms accompanying each package to accredited laboratories for analysis and storage. This procedural layer ensured that the evidence could be used in allied legal processes without raising questions about tampering. The extraction unfolded in a narrow window. The linen cart, now outwardly absurd in its banality, rolled toward a service exit where a black Mercedes with diplomatic plates waited. Reuven guided to the vehicle under a cloak of managerial authority, claiming he had been asked to escort a client for privacy. The black Mercedes eased away as the city clock approached 02:30. Inside, the air smelled of leather and cold coffee. Amir sat with hands folded, his expression measured. Gideon watched him through the rearview mirror as if trying to read a sealed envelope. The drive to a safe location was uneventful in terms of speed, but heavy in the thrum of constrained potential. In the safe house, interrogations occurred with legal oversight present in the form of liaison officers from allied services, ensuring that the intel collected could be shared and vetted. The intelligence yield rippled into immediate action. Names on the ledger led to wire intercepts that confirmed purchase orders in Italy. A container scheduled to leave Genoa was rerouted and inspected. Several couriers were detained for further questioning in 2 Allied jurisdictions. A small manufacturer in Eastern Europe, previously unknown to Western intelligence, became a focus of trade compliance audits. The operational success created a cascade: administrative holds, forensic reports, and a tightening of networks that would force adversarial nodes to seek new, riskier routes. That displacement created opportunities for additional detection. Within weeks, analysts reported that procurement attempts shifted to less predictable markets and more intermediaries, increasing the chance of exposure in the future. Public fallout hardened into diplomatic friction. Tehran's official line accused unnamed agencies of violating norms and threatened reciprocal actions. Monaco balanced reputational risk with rule of law, briefing European partners and the press in calibrated ways. France quietly reviewed internal procedures after the almost incident with local police. NGOs demanded transparency, citing the rights of detained individuals. The press dissected the image of luxury gambling rooms serving as stages for geopolitics. At a televised forum, Lucien Marchand asked whether the casino had been unwittingly instrumentalized. Helena Koskinen argued for judicial oversight. Ambassador Jean Morel emphasized cooperation with investigations. Minister Sahar Karim framed the episode as part of a broader pattern of foreign intervention. The narrative pulled at threads in the public square: the ethics of secret action, the limits of sovereignty, and the role of financial centers as strategic targets. Over the next months, the strategic consequence became clearer. The immediate procurement lines were disrupted. The adversarial network adjusted, shifting resources to alternate routes that were less efficient and more traceable. Allied intelligence used the data to map relationships and to target follow-on operations. The case became a model in internal trainings for how to balance deniability with effect. It also fed a debate about the acceptable public cost of covert success. Some argued that the operation had preserved lives and strategic stability by preventing the transfer of sensitive technology. Others warned that such operations, if normalized, risked erosion of legal norms and created tit-for-tat cycles. 1 month later, the first epilogue snapshot. Public filings and leaked cables had placed some pressure on involved companies. One intermediary, Lucien Moreau, closed his consultancy and sought refuge in passive online anonymity. Sophia Rinaldi faced an inquiry from a banking regulator and temporarily lost access to certain correspondent accounts. The ledger entries formed the core of an Allied audit that froze several transactions. In Monaco, increased scrutiny at high-end venues produced a short-term drop in VIP foot traffic and led to an internal review of service alley procedures. The public conversation centered on corporate compliance and the vulnerability of luxury ecosystems to geopolitical misuse. For the agency, it was a validation of immediate effect, but it also raised internal flags about the need to manage reputational costs. 3 months later, patterns had evolved. Some procurement routes had reconstituted, but at greater expense and complexity. Analysts noted a shift to smaller, more numerous shipments through peripheral ports, increasing detection opportunities. International partners used the case to justify enhanced customs scrutiny and mutual legal assistance. A handful of minor facilitators were prosecuted in local courts, their cases relying on the evidentiary chain the team had established. Diplomatic tensions cooled into calibrated communications. Neither side escalated publicly. The operation was quietly folded into a larger campaign of trade monitoring and interdiction. Inside training rooms, the Monaco case was presented as an example of precise effect with manageable fallout if handled correctly. 6 months on, the legacy was ambiguous. Some key targets had disappeared from surveillance for months, only to re-emerge with altered tactics. Trade flows adjusted, and adversaries learned new evasive measures, increasing the cost of procurement. The Principality implemented modest but meaningful security changes in major venues. Financial institutions tightened onboarding in certain risk categories. The agency documented lessons learned about legal cover, diplomatic coordination, and the balance between capture and administrative disruption. In public discourse, the episode contributed to a deeper conversation about the role of soft power nodes in hard security contests. The final image of the arc remained unresolved, a luxurious baccarat table with a single white chip left precisely at the center, an echo of the choice between chance and calculation. The moral calculus lingered. The operation had prevented immediate transfer of sensitive items and had yielded actionable intelligence. It had also triggered diplomatic friction and sparked questions about due process and sovereignty. Operations in shadows often force decisions without perfect information. They also force nations and citizens to decide how much secrecy they will accept in the name of security. The last image is not of a triumphant banner, but of trade-offs. A chandelier still casting light on a city that will continue to lean into both beauty and risk. If this episode provoked you, leave your city in the comments. Share your perspective on the balance between covert action and legal norms, and subscribe to follow the continuing stories where policy, tradecraft, and consequence intersect. In the world of intelligence, certainty is rare, and ambiguity is the tool that shapes futures.